I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode. Hello, Foxy listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in today. You are going to love today's guest because we're going to I love a guest who's willing to jump down rabbit holes. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
So I've kind of deep dived and sort of stalked you online and all that other stuff, but can you give us a little synopsis, sort of a little bit of background of you for the audience that maybe hasn't dived as deep as I have?
Absolutely. So I'm an attorney first and foremost, but I didn't start out as an attorney, obviously. I started actually at a very young age doing business. So my first business was a babysitting company that I started at 12. From there, I became a lifeguard and opened a swim instructor company. I kind of always knew I wanted to be an attorney, but figuring out how to get there, I did not take the course or the road that most people take. I joined the military at 18 years old because, quite frankly, I wasn't ready to go to college. And through the military, I got my bachelor's degree. The military paid for my law school. And here I am today owning a law firm that practices in California, Arizona, Kentucky, and Texas. And it's been quite a ride.
I bet. And, I always find that people try to sort of string together the chain of events, but I love the fact that sometimes people might not be able to do that for yours. And I think that probably, do you feel that that gave you sort of a richness as you moved throughout the different types of careers?
Absolutely. And you know what's interesting is people assume that as an attorney, you kind of follow that path. You graduated high school, you went to college, you went to law school, and you did it that way. And when they find out that actually at 18 years old, I found myself sitting on the beach instead of in class, and realized quite quickly that when my parents cut me off financially, that I wasn't ready to go to college, I joined the military, and then I had a baby quite young at 21 years old. And so I not only was living my life as I was becoming an attorney, but I was not doing it in the traditional way. I had a 10-week-old when I started law school, and I had a baby in the middle of law school. And through it all, Tanya, I was able to stay on track. So I guess we all get to our points in life different ways. And I'm super happy with how mine went. I learned a ton throughout the process and through it, but it's just been an amazing experience.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the hurdles that you had, both as a business owner and as an attorney. What are, if you kind of think of like what comes to mind of something that you were like, God, I don't want anybody else to have to go through that, or that was a good lesson.
So as an attorney, it's kind of a male-dominated industry. When I first started, actually, my dad was an attorney. So when I told him I was going to be an attorney, he almost talked me out of it. But when I said, nope, I'm going to be an attorney, and when I finally passed the bar, he said, Rachel, don't ever forget that you're a woman and you don't need to be a man in the legal field. And that, I didn't really know what he meant by it, but I tried to really hold on to it. When I first opened my law firm, I didn't have very much money. I started it on $1,800. And so I had to hit the pavement. I had to go out and hustle like so many business owners do. And I remember walking into this huge networking event. As an attorney, I had my cards, and I was really trying to tell the world what I did. And I met this man, and he was older, in a full suit, just to the nines. And he asked me what I did. I told him I was an attorney. And can you believe I had to convince him that I was an attorney? He said no. Finally, I kind of got frustrated with it. And I said, like, I don't need to convince you I'm an attorney, but here's my card. And it was only after I handed him my business card that he said, oh, you're an attorney. You really are. And then he looked me up and down, and I was not in a suit. I was in knee-high boots with a really nice blouse, all put together, but not in a suit. And he said, you're never going to make it if you dress like that. And I was floored. And it was at that moment that I realized what people meant when they said, you're in a male-dominated industry, that I was going to be judged on absolutely everything that I did as a woman in this legal field. But I also looked at him and I said, oh, watch me. And I practiced law how I wanted to. I wear what I want to, and I have a great time doing it.
Well, and I think this is such an important thing because as we were saying, I was kind of telling you off air, I sort of went through this when I went into accounting when I first got out of university. And that's what it was. Like, I don't know how many times I'd be walking into like huge boardrooms and I would be hosting and I would be like teaching the other accountants, you know, this is what we're going to kind of do. And I would be asked to get coffee or make copies or whatever. And I'm like, no, dude, you get me coffee, right? But it was like, I remember, I mean, later I got outspoken to be like, who the hell do you think you, like, do you know who I am? Like, I kind of got a little bit more of an ego, but I remember the first time that happening, kind of thinking, this didn't really just happen, did it? Like, this person didn't just say this to me. Did you find the same thing, that you were kind of like, what this still exists?
Yeah, no, I mean, when I replay it back in my head over the years, I kind of laugh at myself that I actually entertained a conversation of convincing somebody else I was an attorney. Now, if somebody did that, I would just basically walk away and like, I don't need to convince you. Because I was so young and I didn't realize what was happening, I entertained way too many questions trying to just, again, convince him. But there's been time and time again that things like this have happened. Not coffee, but I've been asked to make photocopies and show people how to use the copy machine. And I always feel kind of weird when I have to admit that I actually don't know how to do that because I don't make copies. I'm an attorney. And so it's just a weird thing that I think many people have to go through. I think you grew from it, right? Yeah, I certainly created like a very strong backbone. I think it made me stand up in a way that I probably wouldn't have had I not experienced that as a woman, which I'm so grateful for, but it's almost comedy.
Yeah. And I think for me too, like, it made me also not discount somebody just because they're young. Cause I was very young when I went to university. So I was very young when I got out and got into the business. So I feel like I always looked really young. I'm hoping that carries through into my older years. But I find that, you know, not only did it allow me to sort of speak up for myself more, because I found like I was really timid and I would get really upset about it. And then it sort of almost took me a second to go, like, why am I getting upset? Why am I allowing this to sort of upset me so much? Why am I not just taking it as a funny joke and being like, oh, you're so silly. Go get me a coffee.
Yeah, I had when I first started practicing law, I opened my law firm and we have bar numbers. So we're assigned a bar number and you can really tell somebody's age based on the bar number. So as a young attorney, I remember looking at people that had 5-digit bar numbers and thinking, oh my gosh, like they're archaic. It's time for them to retire, because I was in the 300,000s. But I had so many people that would start conversations with me saying, oh, I see your bar number. You're as a brand new attorney, and they would tell me what to do and tell me opposing counsels, like how it was going to be. And there was a few times early on where they were absolutely wrong. The laws had changed. And I thought, like, I made a conscious effort in my head, Tanya, and maybe you did this too, where it was like, oh, so when I get older, I want to make sure that I don't get so set in my ways that I discount the younger, newer, fresher professionals, because I'm going to win. Like, that's what I thought. I'm going to win because they have no idea about this. And I still have been in it for years now, and there's attorneys far younger than me, but I still remember, like, don't get set in your ways. Go back and check the laws. It changes, and you don't want to feel old in your profession. But in order to not feel old, you really have to give credibility to all of the young people that are hustling.
Well, and I think it's so true because oftentimes that's who, like, if I'm looking to hire somebody new coming in, I will always go to somebody like I call them freshies. I like the freshies, right? That like have all
Love
of this,
that term.
this
I might take that.
yeah, who are like, they're just like pied-eyed and they have all these great ideas because I can sort of sift through it a lot faster because I'm like, I know kind of what works and sort of what doesn't. But I find it challenges me to be more open to go, oh, like I never really thought of that. Like, if somebody would have told me 10 years ago that I would have to like, be doing like these little tiny skits, called reels on, social media, I would be like, you are out of your flipping mind. And, here we are, right? Where I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is what we play. So I think that's a good lesson for anybody who's listening is to make sure, have you gotten stuck? Are you just basing, all of your knowledge off the, 1 year or, 5 years that you took in school, or are you continuing, to learn along the way?
Absolutely. And surround yourself. I still do it. I'm a big believer in surrounding yourself with, I love freshies. I really am going to probably take that and use that phrase, freshies with very experienced attorneys, because if you can surround yourself, then you can learn from it. I'm not saying that all of the attorneys that have 5-digit bar numbers necessarily should retire. They practice a completely different way. But it's nice to hear how they practice and to take some of that through, especially that very traditional professionalism, and learn to weave that in with like the reels and the TikToks and all of this cell phone, live things. I think together it's really allowed me and the other businesses I see that have figured out how to do that to become super unique in business today.
What attracted you to law? Like, is it because you kind of saw your dad doing it as you were growing up, or were you like most kids that you were kind of a little bit oblivious to what your parents actually did for work?
So I knew what my parents did for work. I actually come from a divorced family, and my dad lived out of state. So I had a very traditional visitation schedule where I would spend holidays, spring break and summer with my dad, and the rest of the time would be with my mom and stepdad and sisters on that side. So when I went to my dad's, he had to work, right? And I think as a kid, you don't realize that especially in my situation, I didn't realize that my parents, my dad and stepmom didn't like stop working because I came to town, right? Business as usual. But he tried to make up for all of that time. So he would sit with me after hours, after dinner, and explain to me what was going on in a case and ask me what he should do. Now that was, as an adult, I look back and I think, well, he had to work and he was trying to, use it as a time with me as well. Yeah, but as a kid, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm helping my dad, because I remember one time I said, oh, Dad, you should do X, Y, and Z. And he said, okay, I'm going to do that. And as a kid, I thought, oh, I won. Like I gave him the idea. Now,
I'm brilliant.
Yeah, he probably already was going to do that. And obviously he wouldn't have done it if it was the wrong idea. But I was very aware of law, and I really liked some of the freedom that it allowed him. I would also be lying if I said that I wasn't attracted to the power that it gave. I kind of fell in love, I think, initially as a young kid, looking at how people talk to him as an attorney, the amount of money that you could make as an attorney, and the kind of, being able to puff up your chest and say, I'm an attorney, right? And when I was growing up, it was still doctors and lawyers. Like if you were a doctor or a lawyer, you'd made it. So I was very attracted to that idea, but I was really fortunate to have my dad and my cousin that were attorneys before me kind of guide me through the path.
And I think that's, for anybody who's out there, who's an entrepreneur and, is a parent, I think it's important to do that with your kids, because it was the same situation with me. My mom worked in the internal audit bureau, and she took me to work, and I used to like shred files. Like that's what I would do to help her out. But I remember like one time shredding a file and being like, this doesn't add up. Like this is, and like bringing it to my mom and going, there's a huge mistake here. Right. Like, and that was like, so she's like, oh my God, you're right. And like, I was so excited about it. It probably didn't change anything. Like somebody probably already found it. And that's totally the reason I was shredding the file. But that's what got me interested in numbers. Right. Cause I thought, oh my God, like to me, I remember feeling like, I just transformed the government. Like I just saved some thousands of dollars, like, woohoo, me, and I was like 9 at the time, right?
Yeah.
But in my head, and it really stuck with me. And I really thought like how much of a difference you could make. But part of that was my mom, like really encouraging that and being like, wow, you have a real knack for this. And, and thinking that way. And I think it's important for us to do that, especially in this day and age where there's so many more, I find so many more entrepreneurial opportunities for kids than what there was when I grew up.
Absolutely. My kids, I'm fairly convinced that my children, I have 3, will end up being some kind of entrepreneur. My husband owns a company, so they have only ever been raised in a household where both people are self-employed. They understand the hardships that come with business ownership. Because they see that with us, but they also really have been influenced by the wonderful things about entrepreneurship. The fact that we can take vacation and work, and we can alter our schedules, and to a certain degree, if we need more money, we just go out and find more clients, right? There's that kind of that flexibility. So I think parents that can encourage their kids are wonderful. My mom told me since I was itsy bitsy, again, my parents were divorced, but every time I would have like a child manipulation, which all kids do, right? You manipulated your parents. She would say, "Oh, you're made to be a lawyer," right? She would take the standard like adolescent things where I'd figured out how to get a free drink, or non-alcoholic, but like something free, get into the movie theaters free. And she'd be like, "Oh, it's because you're an attorney. You're meant to be an attorney. You're just going to manipulate the world." And I guess I started to believe it because I was like, oh, I mean, cool, but it's funny how parents can really, and my parents really impacted where I ended up today.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's so true. Sometimes like I look back and my dad was my father was in the military. So he was very like, you just get a job, you work it for 40 years and then you die. Like that's life. Like he was just that's just what you do. And I remember going, God, I don't ever want to be like that. And my mom was very opposite. Like he would say that and my mom would come behind and she would go, do whatever you want to do. Just make sure that you're happy and you have fun. I don't care if you're a cashier at like a store, just make sure you love what you do. That's all that really matters at the end. And so I sort of had like, I was like, oh, I'm going to listen to mom on this, right? Like mom kind of has it a little bit better than this because she was kind of happy and carefree. And she's like, you'll always just find a way to figure it out. And so I've done that with my son. And I remember he was 6 and he came to me with this like little book and I'm like, oh, what's this? And he goes, my business plan. And I was like, you wrote a business plan? And I was like, oh, I got to see this, right? Like what it is. But as I'm reading this, he's like, okay, so I'm going to buy a hotel. And I'm like, oh, that's in my head. I'm like, what the hell are you going to afford a hotel? But he was like,
yeah, that's ambitious.
Yeah. I was like, okay, why a hotel? And he's like, well, he was really into like YouTube and all of that stuff. So he goes, I really want to do YouTubing. So, and I don't like cooking and I don't like cleaning. So if I can live in the hotel, I'll have a chef and a maid and I won't have to clean. And I'm like, okay, makes sense. And he goes, and then for all of the YouTube stuff, I can host it at my hotel and then I never have to pay. And that one event, he's like, he did all the research on how much these events bring in. He's like, that one event will set me for the year. So then everything else is just like, whatever. And I was like, well, can I have a room? And he's like, well, if there's availability. I was like, thanks. But like, I mean,
Well thought out for 6 years old.
For like, 6, I was like,
I wouldn't do that.
like, that's actually kind of like, I remember sitting there and going, I want to live in a hotel. You're right. Like you would have a chef, he was like, yeah, cause I'll make sure it's one with like a full kitchen. I was like, that's an ideal dream, buddy. Like, please go for that.
Never
and please
have to make a bed ever.
Right? I can totally be cleaned up. I'm like, you are on to something. But I think it's just that encouragement that we don't go, oh, that's not realistic. I mean, in my head, there was all those adult thoughts going through of like, well, there's down payments and and the overhead and like all of this kind of other stuff. But I realized it's not that. He doesn't give a shit about that. Like it's going to change tomorrow. It's just nurturing those ideas and those thought processes.
Absolutely. My oldest daughter, she did this when I think she was 16, but it was one of those things where even at 6 years old, 16 years old, they present these ideas to you and it's kind of mind blowing. And I don't know how the real estate market is where you are, but in California, it's incredibly expensive, right? The idea of owning a house or having anything any place to live now for young kids is kind of comical. So my 16-year-old, or at the time she was 16, she came to me and she said, okay, so I'm going to start saving my money because I'm not going to be able to afford to move out when I'm 18, but I don't want to live with you anymore, Mom. Like, she was very much like all 16-year-olds. It was like, I can't wait to get out of here. And she said, so I'm going to buy a house and I'm going to rent the rooms to my friends because they won't be able to pay rent anywhere else either. And they'll end up covering my mortgage payment and I'll live for free and I'll be getting equity in a house. So I won't have to worry about a payment. And I was like, yes, oh my gosh, that is so brilliant.
And it's so logical, right? To them, like
so logical. And the parent thoughts are, well, yeah, do you know how much real estate is in California? And are you going to be able to get a loan and all that? But I was so proud of the thought process because it really does work out if you can get it there, and just the idea that our kids are taking something that is a huge challenge and saying, well, how am I going to make it work for me? I think is the heart of every entrepreneur.
Yeah.
How am I going to get this to work for me, not against me? So,
well, and my son is the same. He just turned 16 just recently. And that was his plan. Cause I had said like, hey, when your dad and I retire, our plan is to buy an RV that we can live in year round. And then we're just going to travel. I'm still gonna, your dad wants to retire. I have no intentions of retiring. Like, I'll retire after I'm in the grave, probably.
right.
Because I love what I do. I love to work. So I said, so he goes, so are you going to sell the house? And I was like, well, yeah, we would have to sell the house too.
It's my house, buddy. I'm selling it.
I'm like, there's no point in us keeping the house because we'll be gone. And what am I going to do with an empty house and all? And he goes, so it was a couple of days later, he comes downstairs and he goes, I've got an idea. How about if it's 5 years, let's say, when you decide to actually go and do this, what if I keep the house for you and I'll pay all of the expenses? Like, I will pay property tax, upkeep, everything on the house. But then if you guys decide that, it's not what you want to do or whatever, then, you have somewhere to come back to and you can just come back home and then I'll move out. And I'm like, I know my son well enough that I was like, what's the catch here? But he had the same idea as your daughter. He was like, there's 4 bedrooms. So I'll keep one, or there's 5 bedrooms, but I'll keep 1 bedroom. I'll rent the other ones out to all of my buddies who will pay the mortgage and all of the expenses. And then, worst case scenario, my mom says, hey, we're coming back. We all have to move out, or hey, we're staying, we're going to sell the house. Either way, I'm making all of the money off of these guys. And he was like, it's passive income. And I'm like,
it's so cool. That's so great.
But I was like, I said, the one thing I love the most about you is that you presented it as an entrepreneur. You presented it as the benefit to me, not the benefit to you.
That's it, right? That's what I've tried to teach that to my kids forever, right? If you're not getting the reaction or the response that you want, you need to change the presentation for everything, because you can't control other people, but it's so hard to say no. And I've told them that too. Like, if you want me to do something that you think my initial reaction is going to be no, then take a step back, see what my responses are going to be, and then just address them so that I have no choice but to say yes.
Yeah.
Right. Our daughter, we moved to like horse property, and she'd always wanted horses. And I don't have anything against horses. I'm just not a horse person. And she said, I want to get a horse. And I said, no, they're so expensive. Like, absolutely not. What are you thinking? And when you move out, what's going to happen? And then a few weeks later, she put together this presentation that had to do with boarding the horses. She was going to open a boarding facility and they were going to each pay for this, and it was going to end up covering all of the horse expenses. And she was going to make, turn something that was going to be a problem for me into, a solution that would get her horse. And I looked at her and I said, well, the answer has to be yes. Like, you've thought of everything. You've presented it in a way that I'm going to profit from this entire deal. We're going to use the property correctly. it ended up not happening because she changed her mind.
As they do, but
Of course. But at the time, you don't say that. You just say, yes. I mean, that sounds so great. What a brilliant idea. And I have no criticisms because you addressed all of my issues. And not only, Tanya, do I think that's entrepreneurship, that's sales, right? And I think when I represent businesses and when I talk to other business owners, you probably do the same thing. I'm shocked at how many don't realize that no matter what business they own, they are salesmen. You have to sell, whether it's goods or services. If you can't sell yourself and your company, you're not going to be profitable. And it really just comes back to making it desirable for your potential customer.
well, and I like what you said too about like, you know, telling your daughter, like, you have to present things different way. And I think that's, to me, that's the difference between an entrepreneur and a business owner. And some people get really pissed off when I say this, but I'm like, a business owner is somebody who have literally bought themselves a job because they are fine with the way it is. And this is the way the business is. And I'm just going to run it this way. It'll be good. Whereas an entrepreneur is like, oh, this is great. Let's change this. Like, let's grow, let's scale. Like, how can we go bigger, better? How can we do different things? And so I think that pivoting, or that being willing to change the way you're presenting stuff is integral. And I know that you're doing that this year with your business, kind of going through a transition. Tell us a little bit about that.
I am. So again, my dad is an attorney, and he didn't grow up. I grew up in watching his firms, and he was a general practitioner, which means that he really liked doing a whole lot of areas of law. I grew up wanting that same thing. So I started my firm, probably because that's what I knew. I started my firm as a general practitioner. I did everything from drafting documents, contracts, estate plans, and I was also in court. I got really good at both, but as I was going into court, I really found that I enjoyed being in court so much. I enjoy the problem solving, and it's funny because I hate puzzles, but like I love like a legal challenge where we solve the problem and get it all the way to the end. So over the course of the last year, I am transitioning to be a strategic litigation firm. We have an amazing trial team. Every single client gets a client liaison, a research paralegal, a lead paralegal, me. I mean, we have just this fantastic team to take clients through the litigation process in a very, very strong strategical way so that they are presenting their case in the best possible way. I was told once that being in court is kind of like being in theater, and I laughed it off. I thought, no, it's not. But to a certain degree, you're not acting out in court, but you really do have to present your client's case much the way that a play plays out or a movie plays out on screen. It's got to make sense. It's got to be entertaining. You've got to hold your audience, whether it's a jury or a judge. And I love that. So that's what we're doing. I'm super excited about it. And I think the fact that I came from a general practice and I've seen all the different sides has really allowed me to become an amazing litigator, because I wrote the documents that I'm also litigating for other people. And I've seen where clients' intentions are and how it can really benefit to start right out the gate with what's going to be litigated. What are our goals? Try and settle along the way, of course. Even though I'm a litigator, so you're never going to settle. You just want to fight. I'm like, oh God, no, like if we can settle, please. But you can get the best possible settlement if you plan this as though you're going to trial. And that's kind of the transition that my firm has done. It's scary, but I'm super excited about it.
So do you get still, like, I think there was one time my husband had to go to court and we had knew nothing. And it was like, he got a ticket, like a cop gave him a ticket, not in person, like, but he got it for failing to stop at a stop sign. And he was like, what the hell is this? Like, and we had a big bread franchise at the time. So it was in a big bread. Anyways, so he's like, I'm going to go to court. And I'm like, should we get a lawyer? And he goes, I don't think so. And I was like, well, this is going to be a disaster, but I am coming to watch this train wreck. And so it was so funny because luckily we had like a really good judge. He was like, do you have representation? He's like, no. And he was like, the judge just goes, all right, this is going to be fun. It's like, okay, here we go. But so anyways, he went through this like big case, and they brought like this woman who had called the police on him, and she testified, and then my husband testified, and then he's like is it the Crown? Anyways, they like, he was like, am I allowed to like use one of their photos? The judge is like, yes. And he's like, okay. And so anyways, at the end, like, and it was like, it felt like really long. We were there almost the whole day because there was other trials happening.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, the judge said what most people don't know is I actually used to be a bread driver before I went into law. And I was like, the only judge in the entire world, right, I'm sure, has done this.
Happens.
Right. And he was like, so I know that what he's saying, to turn a 90-degree angle at this speed in a bread truck, you would tip, you would lose all of your stuff. It just doesn't make sense. So I'm dismissing the case. You would have thought my husband and I won a murder charge. Like, we were so excited. Right? Like, and trying not to like, celebrate in the courtroom because we're like, be professional. But like, I can imagine, I know it's probably not that big, but does it still kind of give you that sort of elation when I'm sure that would keep happening?
It really does. So it's actually probably better because I'm not emotionally attached to anything. Right. So I don't get the stress that comes along with it. I stress a little bit, but there's nothing like winning a case. It is so validating as a professional. You're like, oh, I actually know what I do. Like, I know what I'm doing, because I still sometimes think in my head that I'm like this 18-year-old that's lost. So it validates me as a professional, but it's also really, really fun to know that you just changed somebody's life. Because law, being in even though it was maybe just a minor traffic violation, like, it is all consuming, right?
Oh, and like it was scary because you're like,
I'm like, you lose sleep over it. So knowing that I took that away from my clients is really wonderful. I will say though, winning a case as an attorney that you think you're going to lose is probably the best thing ever. I don't tell clients ever. Like, I'm not ever like, oh, I think like, well, I mean, sometimes
you're not going to make it, Bob.
But there's sometimes where they like insist and it's like kind of gray, and you're like, okay, I think, but I'm not sure. And then you win it and you're like, this is so awesome. And even especially as an attorney, because I'm in front of these judges and I can't let my clients think that I didn't ever have faith in it. Right. It's like, reserve, and then I come home and I'm like, dude, I rocked it. Like, that was the best thing ever. So,
and I love to hear that because I think it does two things. It lets people see attorneys in a different light. I'll be honest, because I'm sure you still get the stigmatism that people are like, you are the last person I ever want to meet.
In fact, when I first do consultations, that's like the first thing I tell people. I say like, how are, the pleasantries, how are you? And then I always kind of make a joke of it. I say, well, I mean, you're not that good if you're calling me, right? Because nobody wants to call an attorney, but what can we do, to solve your problem? I really do believe that every single situation has a solution. It's a matter of whether we have the money to fix it, whether we have the time to fix it, and how we're going to go about it. Sometimes the facts are really bad, and I tell my clients, like, we're just going to try and round the edges, right? We're going to make this as the best possible outcome. But yeah, I mean, nobody wants, there's a statistic, if you believe statistics, that says that being in a lawsuit is one of the top 5 most stressful things in a lifetime.
Oh, I can imagine that. I can imagine, because I mean, really, I think the ticket was like, I can't even remember what it was. It was a couple $100. And now at the time, it would have been a struggle to be able to afford that because we had a very young family, but you would have thought we won $10 million out of that lawsuit. Right?
Yeah. And I have clients that call me and they think their world has completely fallen apart. Right. And as an attorney, I oftentimes get to tell them, so this, I realize, is the worst thing to ever happen to you. And you feel like the ground just split apart, but it's really not so bad. I don't think from a legal perspective, it is insurmountable. It's just something that we have to deal with and we have to get through, but I think you're going to be okay. And hopefully that helps a little bit, right? And they can breathe. I think so much of it is the fear of having to go into court. you see what happens on TV. And for everybody that's listening, it is not like it is on TV at all, right? It's not like that at all. But you see all of this. And then even as an attorney, I think of like the picture that comes to my mind when I think of attorneys is like this grand office with this huge executive chair, marble everywhere, and
that big wooden cherry desk,
like really small, right? Like insignificant and stupid, and that's really scary. So I, to the extent that I can, and I think every legal professional should, make it so that it's understandable, so that clients know what is going on, because once you really know what's going on, it's not so scary. It's something that can be tolerated and that we can, get through. And that's all it is. It's just a process that you have to get through.
Well, and I think it's important, especially for entrepreneurs, to, find an attorney that they're comfortable with, because there's no better feeling than having an attorney that that you have that relationship with. I mean, my favorite moment, and it's only happened once, is somebody had sent me like a cease and desist letter, which they wrote themselves. I could clearly tell.
And you laughed as you were reading it, right?
I was like, okay, but I was like, oh, I'm going to have my like TV moment. And I made an appointment with my lawyer. I walked in and I was like, Ian, take care of this. And I kind of like launched it on his desk, and he reads it and he's like, yeah, don't even worry about it. I'll handle it. I'll just send you an email saying done. And so like I walked away, and like within 2 hours, an email came in. He's like, done, don't worry about it. And I was like, man, having an attorney is awesome. Because I would have stressed and I would have been like, oh my God, what is this? And like, is it actually ridiculous or right? But he just like, it was so great. I was like, that was like, and I think it wasn't super, a couple $100 to make my situation go away and this person go away.
Truly. And so calling an attorney is usually done when something comes up like a demand letter. But my advice to all entrepreneurs, all business owners, is at least establish that relationship with an attorney. Hopefully you never need it, right? But when you get that letter, you don't have to worry about Google and reviews and finding somebody. You already know, and you can drop it in their inbox and you can wipe your hands of it. And that's honestly how you handle that with your lawyer, was like every attorney's dream, because that's all we want is people to be like, here's my problem, here's my money, make it go away.
Yeah.
Right. But it's also really refreshing to you. If you hadn't had him, you would have been stressed. You would have been trying to figure out who to call, worried about it all. So kind of like preventative medicine, right? Just know the attorney that you're going to call if it ever comes up. And then it's way less stressful. My husband always says, just call my attorney. Just call my attorney. I get called sometimes. Like last week, I got a call and I was like, are you, DIY Barbecue's attorney? And I was like, I mean, what happened and who told you, right? And then I get a text message from my husband. He's like, I gave this person your number. I told them I wasn't talking to them anymore. And I'm like, oh my God, all the time. But he's very stress-free, because every time he doesn't want to talk to somebody, he call my attorney. And then I deal with it. So
I feel that, because my husband says that all the time. He's like, oh, I don't know. You'll have to ask Tanya. Like, and I'm like, stop it. You are you're older than me. Like, you should be able to make your own decisions. But I'm like, stop using me as an excuse.
Yeah, don't. And then I remember one time, it was funny. My husband said he was like getting his car fixed at like the service shop or something. And he got into it with the bill and he told them to call me. And I literally got on the phone with the woman and I was like, so I'm his wife. I do happen to be an attorney. I really don't have time for this. So I'm not really sure what's going on between the two of you, but you need to figure it out. I'm not going to negotiate like his bill for him. And she laughed. And then I told my husband, I was like, this is like an abuse of me. Like, don't do that. So it's just, my wife's an attorney.
I am not your attorney anymore.
Right. Unless you want to start writing me those checks to cover my bills.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny. I'm glad I'm not the only one who kind of goes through that. So if someone is, so everybody who's kind of listening to this episode and stuff, and we have people from all around the world. So we'll get to how they can find you if they're in your areas. But what are some of the key things you think that, either questions that people ask or some things people should know when they're looking to have a lawyer, sort of on their Rolodex? I might have just aged myself saying Rolodex.
Rolodex. No, I know. So we aged ourselves together because I was right there with you. much like what you said, you have to trust your attorney. So every industry has the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think in law, we have a lot of the bad. Shows like Better Call Saul and all of these things on TV make attorneys get kind of a bad rep. But there's a lot of really great attorneys out there. So first and foremost, whether you're newly hiring an attorney or you have an attorney, you must trust that attorney. It could be the best attorney in the world. And if you don't trust what they're telling you, you're wasting your money. You're literally paying them to tell you something that you don't believe. So if you don't trust your attorney or you don't trust one you did a consultation with, it's time to find one that you do. Now, I hope I don't shoot myself in the foot on this one, but I also don't, I get a lot, and I say this because I get a lot of people that find me on Google, and I'm very fortunate to have pretty, really good Google reviews, but I don't think you should find your attorney on Google. I think you should go out in town, talk to other people, and find somebody who had a pleasant experience with an attorney, and that that doesn't mean they won, right? It just means, again, that they trusted their attorney, their attorney gave them sage advice, and they were able to handle the legal situation. You can cross-check that with reviews, but reviews are just so arbitrary. You get, one that was like an opposing person, and of course they're ticked off that they lost, or I just don't know that for something as heavy as a legal case, I would only rely on reviews. So I would talk to my friends and my family if I was looking for an attorney. And then it's okay to find an attorney that does what you want them to do. Specifically in like criminal law, like you might have the best friend, or everybody says hands down they're the greatest attorney, but they don't handle criminal cases. Don't hire them to do your DUI. Like, get an attorney that does that will works in the areas that your cases, so they can be fluent with the judges and with the attorneys around. And that is going to get you the best possible outcome that you can. I will say, this kind of goes off a little bit, but be honest with your attorney. There is nothing that breaks down the attorney-client relationship faster than when clients leave out a big thing with their attorney, and now you won't trust your attorney. You'll be shopping for a new one, or your case will, blow up or something. So as you shop for an attorney, tell them all of the garbage. It's all confidential, right? So I like to say, like, word vomit. More is better.
Use it as your therapy session.
Right, they call us counselors for a reason, right?
Yeah, like, instead of like going to church and like repenting your sins, for the Catholics, just go to the attorney and be like, all right, this year I have to tell you all of the crap that I did.
Oh yeah, and if there's time, if I could tell you a really quick story on why this is.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I had a client that I was representing, and this was years ago, and it was on a child custody case. My client was accused of having a drinking problem with the kids, right? So he'd been served, he comes into my office, retains me to do this. And my question to him as we're talking about this, remember the allegations are you drink too much around the kids. Okay. I said, is there any, have you had drinking issues in the past? Is there any truth to this? Basically, is there anything I need to worry about? No, right? We get to the thing. I'm like, okay, so there's no past. No, it's never been a problem. Like, I don't drink too much. Yada, yada, yada. Great. So we prepared for the whole thing. We're in trial, and the judge looks at me, and I've been in front of this judge forever, right? And he goes, what do you have to say? So I present my case, and he looks at me, and I tell him, there's no history here. This is just mom trying to take away the kids and use it as a strategic advantage, and blah, 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 blah. And at the end, after I'm done, he says, well, except for the DUI that your client got 3 years ago. And I was like, right, except for that. I had no idea what to say.
Since then.
Because really, and then I walked out. Fortunately, we were able to still get, nothing happened to my client. The judge was realized too that this was probably a manipulation thing. But I say this all to say, I walked out into the hall, and I looked at my client, and I said, you didn't tell me about the DUI. And he said, you didn't ask me if I got a DUI. And I said, I'm sorry, I didn't go through every single question that could ever occur. When an attorney says, is there any history of alcohol issues? Is there anything I should know about? Like a DUI seems quite relevant there. And it would have been easier if he told me, because I just wouldn't have presented the information. I wouldn't have said there's no issues of alcohol. It would have just been presented as exactly like you said, like since 3 years ago, there's been this, he's done X, Y, and Z, like there is no present concern. We don't need any changes. And so telling your attorney everything, remember, we don't know what's going on. We are only given what you tell us or what the opposing people tell us. So overshare, tell us all the goods, right? I love the drama too. I think I'm an attorney because I love all of the drama. I should never admit that, but tell it. And then we can use it where we need to. Sometimes we can take the sting out of it. If you've ever heard that phrase, where we bring up this really bad thing to the judge before it can be used against us later. So when you're shopping for an attorney, not only do you need to trust them, but you need to trust them with all of your baggage. And then you need to come clean with it all.
Well, and I think also remembering too that they're on your side, so they need to know the whole story, so that all of a sudden they're not, like you said, in court and the judge is going, are you sure about that?
I know something you don't know, and you're like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. You would be surprised how many people don't think that I'm on their side. They think I'm an attorney, and that if they package it in a pretty bow for me, then I will be able to regurgitate that
pretty package, right?
Unfortunately, that doesn't work. I package it in a little bow once I have all the pieces, and I take out all of the crap, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think that's awesome, and I think I love that you came on and like shared some of these stories, because that was one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, was to be able to take that stigmatism of it out for entrepreneurs, because a lot of people think like, I don't want, the only time I'm going to go to, an attorney is like when I'm in trouble, as opposed to preventing that. And making sure that you're having, like you said, picking the right lawyer. So are you doing some contract work or whatever to make sure that all of that is kind of lined up? And, to also reiterate, and you can agree or disagree with me, but looking up contract forms or legal signing forms on Google is not good business practice.
So, I will say, and I tell all of my people that work for me, always start with Google. They say like, where can I find this? And I'm like, well, did you Google it? Because I feel like you should start with Google. That being said, Google, LegalZoom, all of those different platforms, they can be really great, except you need to know what it is it says. So when you just Google searched asset and purchase agreement, it's going to give you a generic one that may not cover everything it needs to cover, and it may have clauses that are really against you in it. So unless you are, I guess, savvy enough to understand what the document that you Google search actually says and its legal consequence, I wouldn't rely on it.
Well, and I remember once, because we also own a Taekwondo studio, and when I got involved in it, because my husband had it before we got together, the first thing I did was take his contract form to my lawyer. And I was like, can you take a look at this? And he was like, what is this? And I said, like, it's a contract for our membership. And he goes, what do you want to know? I can poke a hole in anything. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I can poke a hole through anything. Like, what do you want me to say? And I'm like, I just want to know if it's like kind of okay. And he was like, I need to know if you are really planning on sticking hard to it. Because one of the things is like, there's like no refunds, blah, 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 blah. We don't refund you if you pay for the full year and then you leave, it just stays as credit. And he was like, how strict do you want to stick to this? Because it was sort of like you said, he's like, I want you to be really honest, because I will word this so that you can go after them and like actually like sue them for this money. Or are you really going to care at the end of the day? Then it'll just be a little bit different. So I thought that was like kind of interesting for me, because I was like, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to like, honestly, our fee is not that much. So I was like, I'm not going to pay your fee to like go after somebody for, I think it was like, I think maybe our biggest fee is like $850 for the year. I was like, not worth it.
I think that's really, and that's such good advice, because you don't always want to sue. You don't always want to litigate. I have had clients sued and they say like, I was right. And I'm like, okay, so it's like $2,500 for you to just pay what they're asking for. It's gonna be like 15 grand if you want to prove that you're right. Like, this is just cost benefit analysis. Like, cut the check, never talk to them again. At the same token, I have had people come into my office. Actually, I had a potential client going on America's Got Talent. And they said, I want you to, like, they brought in the America's Got Talent contract and they were like, read this and let's negotiate. And first thing I told them was, this is why they were a potential client and they didn't hire me. I said, you don't get to negotiate this contract. So it's like your MasterCard contract. Like, you're not going to go to Master and be like, actually, I'm not going to agree to this, right?
In clause 2A, I would actually like it to say this.
Yeah, exactly. There's part of contracts is just knowing what you're signing and being okay with it. And when I went through the America's Got Talent contract, they were like, wow, this is just horrible. And I was like, I mean, what are you using America's Got Talent for? Like, you're going to be on the show, you're going to have X, Y, and Z. You're not going to negotiate this contract really. But most of contracts is knowing what it says, so it's not surprising later. You can, I probably should never say this on publicly. I will today though. You can get into a really crappy contract. It's okay. Like, I've gotten into really crappy contracts voluntarily because I knew it was a stepping stone to get me where I was, and I did not have the power or the, whatever, the credibility to like negotiate contracts. So I entered into a really crappy contract, but I knew what it said. So it was no surprise what the expectations were. And I would say really for every business owner, you've got to start somewhere. You're not probably going to get the most ideal terms. You may not be able to afford the most ideal contract. Know what it is that your contract says. And then realistically, if you're not going to sue over it, why spend the $2,000 to have your attorney draft up some like ironclad thing when you're like, I'm never going to sue for $150?
Well, I think I love that you said that, because I think that's important. And I even think when I first got my first commercial lease, that was the first thing I did, was go to my lawyer and go, can you tell me what this says? Because I mean, first of all, it was like 17 pages and the wording, I don't know how you get through that in your day, but the wording, I was like, I don't understand it. So like, I literally walked in with my contract, and I find everything funny. So I was like, can you just read this and let me know if I'm offering a kidney? Like, I just want to know if it was okay. But I'm really glad I did that, because he came back and he was like, actually, do not rent from this person, because your lease stipulates that you are responsible for everything. So if there's a leak in the roof or anything, you have to fix it. He's like, this isn't a good lease. This is the type of lease that I want you to go for, where you're responsible for like the inside stuff, but you're not responsible like for like changing light fixtures, and like you're responsible for the bulbs, but not the light fixtures. It's like, this makes you might as well own the building, because you are literally on the hook for absolutely everything. And your rent will go up as property tax. Like, there's nothing is saving you from this. And you're also stuck in it for 5 years. And I was like, I would have like, if I had not have heard all of that, I would have went, it doesn't seem so bad. Like, the rent really kind of seems small, but the rent, the way it was written, the rent was contingent on a bunch of other things. So they could literally raise the rent the next month and I would have no say in it. But to read it, I didn't know. Like, I remember sitting there going, what? Where is that? Like, show me where that line is. I must have missed that page.
I have clients who I will bring in, they'll bring in the commercial leases too. And they'll say like, and I always start with just what the lease says, right? That's every contract. It's, well, I'm just going to tell you what it says and you can tell me whether that's what you want to agree to, right? Because who am I? And I will tell, there's times where it's, well, you have to be a personal guarantee. I don't think on a commercial lease, you should have to have a personal guarantee. But if you're a brand new company, you may have no choice but to have a personal guarantee. So it's less truly about how crappy is your contract and more, do you know what you're getting into? On that contract that you didn't sign, you probably found a different landlord, right? And you found a different place, or you were able to negotiate out of it. But if you hadn't been able to, right? If at least you would have gone in, and when you got your rent jacked up the next year, and you wouldn't have been like, oh my God, what happened? You'd be like, oh yeah, I knew this was a possibility. And at least, again, knowledge is power, guys. So use your attorneys, use everybody everywhere to find knowledge so you can make educated decisions.
Well, and I think even just the piece of knowledge, like he was, and I can't even remember what the word was, but maybe like triple net lead. I can't even remember, but he was like,
Yeah,
if you ever
there's,
hear
there's
somebody say,
modified gross, and there's all triple net, and there's all
yeah, and
sorts
he's
of.
like, if anybody ever says it's a triple net lease, I want you to walk away. Like, just don't do it. Walk away. We'll
Like it's
figure
like
out.
a landlord's dream,
Yeah.
right?
But
And it's
I
like,
was like, I don't like, I mean,
right?
it was I was young when I first got my property. So I didn't know any of this stuff, but it was actually my stepdad at the time who was like, you need to go and see somebody who knows more than you to make sure this is okay. Do not bring it to a friend. Do not like go and see somebody who professionally does this. And I'm really glad he did, because the person who ended up going in there, I ended up knowing through business. Like within 6 months, they were like, our rent has already been raised 5 times and I can't do shit about it because I'm stuck here. Like, and I was
Yeah,
like,
and your lawyer cost you maybe a couple $100, but look how much it saved you thousands and
oh,
thousands.
so
Right.
much. Well, and then the roof caved in too.
And they were responsible for it, right? Or like on the flip side, people are like, no, they would never be responsible. That's totally bizarre. Maybe, but you have to sue over it. That's the thing. If the lease says that you're responsible and it's maybe the law contradicts that, then you're in a lawsuit. Why?
Yeah.
Like let's avoid lawsuits at all costs, which is totally my philosophy, even though I do lawsuits for a living.
Yeah. Even though you like them. But I think it's good to know that, it is important to look for somebody who's like, hey, the best case scenario is that we don't go to court and that I can just make this
Right.
go away.
Yeah, like I tell people, I don't want to talk myself out of business, but like you don't need this. There's a way to avoid it. Like, let's not do it. I had a client who owned a like cookie bakery or something and didn't realize that they'd already signed it. They were years in. Their rent was contingent on the percentage of their gross revenues. Well, everybody knows business, like gross revenues don't have anything to do with the profit at the end of the day, right? The first couple of years that she was in business, it was fine because she wasn't making any money, but then she started making money and she's like, my rent is just like, I have to just keep cutting these checks because of my gross revenue. And I was like, yeah, it sucks. And that's what your lease says. Like, should have read it.
Well, and I think, I think there's so many areas where people can, sort of use this advice. And I think I'm so grateful that there's people like you that are out there that are saying, hey, this isn't a last ditch stop. Like this is something that, you can do as preventative items, just making sure that you also have all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed the way you're supposed to, that it's going to make sense. And, you're not going to get to that point where they're going to go, yeah, this doesn't mean nothing.
Right. Like you wouldn't have sued over the 150, I don't know, I'm just making up that number, but like a contractor, right, on the other hand, probably wants to make sure that their bid where they're doing $150,000 worth of work, they can sue under, right? So you just really want to make sure as you own a company, you've owned quite a few, like that you are setting it up so that you can run it how you want to run it and know everybody, whether you're an experienced entrepreneur or you're brand new in the business, that you can ask anybody that owns a company. Like, I don't care if you could get in touch with Jeff Bezos. I don't know if you have his cell phone number or whatever, but like call him, be like, oh my gosh, I have this problem. He has experienced the same problem and nobody is going to judge you. Like, just find people that can help you and that can give you the advice. Because if there's one thing I've learned with entrepreneurs is that it's a really big network of people, but every single entrepreneur wants to help the next entrepreneur, even if they're your direct competition. Like, you want to help a company succeed.
Yeah. And I think it's true. And I think like, I know for me, like just in my experience, it's been beneficial because even like once of going, okay, here's like, I'm doing this new program. It's a year-long program. Here's sort of the contract. Can you just, I'm not going to sue over it, but I just want to make sure it makes sense and I haven't screwed up. And he was like, why? Like, and he goes, this isn't legal, but this doesn't make any sense. So, and he was like going through my pay structure and he's like, if you're allowing people to pay monthly, it needs to cost them more. And I was like, what? And he's like, you're on the line for it. So if you have no intention of like going after them for it and having to pay for that, then make them pay you more each month, because that's the benefit of paying monthly and not paying it all in one lump sum. And I was like, that's brilliant. Like, and that was like 15 years ago. And I've never stopped going, yeah, that's actually true. Because if they walk away in the midst, halfway through their payment, I'm out the money. And frankly, I'm not going to go after them. And I should,
No.
another thing I probably shouldn't say out loud.
Right?
People
Like,
are
she's
like,
gonna sue you. Don't not pay her. She will sue you.
everybody's like, that's okay. I'll join Tanya's programs and just pay monthly. If I don't like it, I'll just leave. I'll just say, watch it, you guys. I have Rachel on my side now. So.
That's right. You have to be really careful about what you say, only because everything never goes away, right? But
yeah.
I'm always told, like, you should not tell people that you don't like lawsuits and that you think that like everybody wants. I always say, like, let's all just sit around the campfire and like sing kumbaya and eat s'mores. And they're like, you should never say that. Like, that is not what you like want to put off as like a litigator. And I'm like, yeah, but I kind of like really believe that. Like, why are we fighting? Let's just all get along. I say that kind of tongue in cheek because I believe in advocating for people's rights and all of that. But it is really funny how you put something out and then you're like, well, don't hold me to what I said. Right. No,
but I think it's true because I think like even like through my whole career, when I started doing like business coaching and stuff, I've always said to people, like, I will have a free discovery call with you, but I'm going to be honest with you. And I got more picky over the years of saying to people like, hey, we're not going to work together. And it could be because I don't think I'm the person that can help with their particular situation. So I'll put them to somewhere else. Or now it's like, you are a train wreck and I'm not prepared to go down your track with you. Like, sorry, there's no stops at this station. I never say that to a person. Never said that to a person. But I find that those people that I have said to them, like, regardless of whether it was when I owned a retail store or even in consulting, that I've said, hey, I'm not the person for you, but here's a couple of names that I think would be really good. That person always comes back or always refers me. Like, it's always just really benefited me to be honest. Do you find it's the same thing for you? Like when you're kind of saying, let's just sing kumbaya together.
So I look at, in fact, I'm going to give away my secret now so everybody that does consultations will know. I look at how many attorneys they've had in the past on one of their cases, because I think that is telltale. There is not, while you should trust your attorney, if you've gone through 5 that you don't trust, it's not like 5 attorney issues. Like at that point, it's like
it's you.
I'm very gentle when I say that, but that's one thing I look for. And then I just tick up my retainer, right? Like I don't have a fixed retainer. So the more crazy the story is, the more like, I don't think this is a good fit. My retainer just keeps ticking up. And at the end, it'll be like, yes, it's going to be $50,000 to retain me. And they're like, what? I thought like 2,500. I'm like, no, I can't. Like, if I'm going to work with you, I really need to like know you're there, or I just don't want to work with you. So I'm going to make it so that I outprice myself. I think I'm very fortunate to, as a law firm owner, to be able to turn away clients that were not a good fit. I still sometimes fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I really want this case, or I really feel for this client, so I'm going to make an exception. And Tanya, every single time, 6 months down the road, I'm like, why did they do that? In fact, even like a couple of weeks ago, I took on a client and I was driving home and I'm like, I'm going to regret this. Like come 6 months, I'm going to be like, this was a stupid decision. But I try to turn away the clients that were not going to be a good fit, or a case that I just don't think I can advocate for correctly for personal reasons. I try to always turn them away. And when I don't, and I turn away from my gut, I regret it every time.
Oh, I'm the same as you. I just had a call. I'm better now, but I'll usually get the person who's like, please, like, I really need your help. And I think you could be really good, but they're very like soft and very gentle and very like set. And I'm like, I will run, like, I'm going to eat you up and spit you out. Like, it's going to be a nightmare for you on the type of coach I am, because I'm not sensitive. I'm not going to sit there and tell you that you're pretty every day. And
no compliment sandwich, right?
Like, it's not to say that I'm like, like tough, but like I'm not like military 20 push-ups right now. Let's go. Like, but I'm not for everybody. And I've learned that because I've taken on those clients and it was just like, I'm like, oh my God, this is like babysitting. Like I can't, for me, I'm just like, I can't physically keep telling this person that they're awesome 20 times a day. Like, I just don't have time for you anymore.
You're not a cheerleader. They need to go find their own cheerleader and their own team.
Well, and that's what I say now. Like, if you want somebody who's going to tell you that everything you do is awesome, and then I am definitely not the person for you. I will tell you when I think something's awesome and I will celebrate the crap out of you. But if I think you're doing something that's stupid, I'm going to tell you, and I'm not going to pussyfoot around it. I'm just going to go, what you're doing is stupid.
That's totally how I feel. And I think I take that into every area of my life, including like my employees. I'm not a warm, fuzzy person. I mean, I can be kind and I'm thoughtful and all that, but if you do something wrong or something that that goes against your case or against whatever, I'm just going to tell you. I'll move on quite quickly, but I'm not going to sit here and do that. And I tell clients, I'm not going to be your emotional support system, and you're going to need one through your lawsuit. So go find that person. But when your kids get taken away, or they call you on a Saturday night and they say they don't want to come over to see you, like, I don't care. I have my own children that I'm watching, and that's really sad. I can't do anything about it on a Saturday because the courts are closed. So you need to go call somebody else, because that's like outside of what, like, at my pay grade. Like, I can't do anything. Call law enforcement. I don't know,
Yeah.
but like Saturday, the courts are closed. And there are some people that really don't like that. You know, they want to have the attorney that's going to give them the warm fuzzies, that's going to tell them they're going to win. I will not say that I think you're going to win if I don't think you're going to win just for a paycheck. I don't care that much. I don't want you to be mad at me later. I'm going to tell you how good your case is. And if it changes partway through, I will be the first to call you and be like, well, I think we're going to lose. I think now is the time to cut the loss early, right? And I've had clients that will get really mad at me and they'll go hire another attorney to finish it. And I'm like, okay, like, sorry, I didn't tell you what you wanted me to tell you,
Yeah.
you know, but we're just not a good fit then.
Well, and it's funny that you say that, because I'm the same way. I have to be careful with my employees and like guard myself, because like one time they were like, you don't do like any like employee reviews. And I'm like, you're getting steady paychecks. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, then I'm happy with your
Tired.
then I'm happy with your work. Like, what do you want? So, I mean, I've gotten better over the years, but when it was like, you know, when I had the accounting firm and I was at like 25 employees, like I still like, I knew who they were and we would laugh, but it was just like, just come in and do your job. And I realized I now scaled down on my employees, because I was just like, I don't have time to do that coaxing that, you know, my husband is very good with it. Like, he'll bring people in, like, how are things going? If my employees ever have a problem or something is wrong, they come to me. I am 100% there for them, but I'm not going to ask. If you come in like, oh, I'm just going to ignore you. Like, you figure your shit out. You obviously have something going on. It's like, I don't ask those questions. I'm not feminine in that way, that I'm like, oh, sweetie, what's going on? Like, I'm just like, can you sigh? Like, I'm trying to work.
Yeah.
Can you go be sad in the closet?
I used to think that I was like the greatest boss ever. Like, I was like, oh, I'm a chill boss. I'm so cool. Like, who doesn't want to work for me? And I realized, I guess about 5 years in, that I'm not that cool of a boss. I really want you to come in. I want you to work really hard. I'm going to be really annoyed if I find out that you're not doing your job. And I'm not going to give you the compliment sandwich. If you do something wrong, I'm going to tell you. If you do something great, I'm going to tell you. And there's just no in between. And I've actually done a lot of work on how to, you know, be a better boss. But it was really funny when I finally had the like moment where I was like, oh, I'm not as cool as I thought I was.
I was the same way. I remember I was on a podcast interview a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, hey, I was like, I like did some research. I don't even know where he found this, but he was like, when you had your accounting company, you also had a daycare that they could bring their in. Like, why did you decide to do this? And I was like, I know the answer you want. I know you want the answer that I cared about my employees, and I had a lot of moms. So I was doing like work-life balance. That is the answer I can give you. But if you want the truth, I knew that strategically, if their kids were just next door in a daycare, the likelihood of them taking time off was a lot less. So,
but you know what? I think that's an amazing business and entrepreneur decision. And I don't think that anybody, like, I love that truth answer, because I don't think anybody should be upset about it. They shouldn't say like, oh, the better answer was like, you wanted to do good. No, I was benefiting myself But ultimately, I provided a work environment that they got their kid right next door and didn't have to take time off and lose pay. So I think it's really sad actually in this, and I see it a lot now where business owners get, it's like if they benefit at all, then they weren't doing it for the right reasons. And I'm thinking, no, let the business owner benefit as well, and everybody can be happy.
And I like what you said, because I'm in business to make money. Like, I don't know why people are like, I remember having one lady who was like, oh, like I volunteer all of the time. And I was like, oh, I don't have time to volunteer. And she was like, I just do it out of the goodness of my heart. And I went, no, you don't. And she was like, what? And I went, no, you don't. Nobody volunteers out of the goodness of their heart. You are getting something for doing this. So you're never just giving 100% freely, whether it's a good feeling, whether it's like a kickback, whatever the case may be. Like, and that's okay. It's 100% totally okay.
Totally okay.
But don't be shy about going, oh, I'm doing this because I really like the party that all the volunteers get to go to, or whatever the case may be. Like, I'm like, it's okay to make money.
Own it. It is totally okay. And it's okay to benefit. And I am not rich enough to be a philanthropist. And I can't take your accolades to the grocery store to buy milk. So that is my job. Like, I tell everybody, all my staff, everybody that's ever worked for me, like, don't lie to me and don't mess with my money, right? Those are like the two things as a business owner that are really, really important to me, because I don't have somebody cutting my check. I have to cut my own check. And so I have to be able to do this. And I want my staff to enjoy working for me. Don't get me wrong. Like, I want them to love their job, and I want to be able to provide things for them. But at the end of the day, like, I do this for the benefit to me.
Yeah.
It's my otherwise, I'd go get a job for somebody else.
Which I would be a horrible employee.
I would be so bad. I would every time
I think of that. Yeah. I'm like, I cannot go back into the workforce. This would be like a disaster. And I'm not willing. Like, I had one client who was like, I love working with you, but I would really love to have you at my beck and call. And I was like, okay.
Sorry,
and he goes, how much would that be? And I go, yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, not a problem. It starts at 500,000 and it needs to be paid up front. And then you have me for the 12 months. And he was like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, but just let me know. We can send you the invoice for it and stuff like that. And my poor secretary was like, how did you just come up with that number? Like, she's like grabbing my price. She's like, I don't
how
on the price.
Willing to be on call for a year.
I'm like I literally just made the number up. And if somebody's ridiculous enough to pay for it, sure. But I doubt they are.
I really want you to be the only attorney on my case for a year. Like, whatever it takes, I just want a flat fee. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's going to be $250,000 for a year. And then you will have your own paralegal assigned to it. And I will answer your calls whenever you want them. And he was like, well, that seems a bit pricey. And I was like, well, I don't want to do it. I mean,
I have to start saying that. Oh, this is why it's that much.
Yeah, because I don't want, so if I'm gonna do it, it's gonna be like something where I'm like, oh, I just really can't say no to that, but I had a client once who said, why did you become an attorney? And she was like this very sweet old lady. She's since passed away, but I said, do you want the real answer? She'd interviewed tons of attorneys. And I said, do you want the real answer? Or like, do you want like the answer that you want to hear? And she's like, no, sweetheart, I really love you. Like, I've looked at so many attorneys, tell me the truth. And that's going to be, I was like, I really wanted to be able to tell people that I was an attorney and get paid to give them advice, whether they follow it or not. And she crestfallen, Tanya, like just crestfallen. And I said, I mean, I also wanted to do good and make society better. And she's like, oh, and I was like, okay, whatever answer you want, I don't care. Like, I love my clients, I love doing good. That is, at the end of the day, I don't own a law firm for that. I own it so that I can like make some money.
Well, and I think that's just it, right? Like, I get people too all the time will say like, why don't you take everybody? And I'm like, because I don't like everybody. Like, I've just gotten to a point in my career where I can say, I don't want to work with you because I don't like you. Like,
and isn't it refreshing? Isn't it like the most amazing point? And for all new entrepreneurs, you don't get to do that right out of the gate, right?
No. You got to take all the crappy clients and deal with it all.
Yeah, but when you finally get to a point where you're like, oh, I know the next client is going to come in, and you can be picky and choosy. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's fun because I literally went to that client and I'm like, hey, we're breaking up. And this is going to come as a shock, but you're going to need to get over it. And I gave him his favorite bottle of scotch. And I was like, so you hang in there. And that was kind of it.
So that's
it was
way
like,
nicer than what I do.
It took over a decade for me to do that because there was so many times where I was like, just everybody, I will just take everybody. That's the path you kind of take. But I think in subsequent times, I think you learn these lessons of who you work really well. I think it's important, I should say, I think it's important for you to take all those people, because with those experiences allowed me to go, this is the client that I can get the best results for. This is the client that, I like working with. And because I like working with them and because I think they're going to get the best results, it's going to work great for me because great testimonials, great word of mouth, all that kind of other stuff. But if I wouldn't have gone through all of those other people, I wouldn't be able to go, oh, you're one of those ones. I don't want you.
and you need that, right? And I used to fall, again, I still sometimes do fall for the trap of, well, I'm going to lose my children and you just don't understand. And it's so easy for you. Like, can't you just help me with this one thing? And I absolutely fall for the sob story. I had one person who said that I have a constitutional right to an attorney. And I was like, well, I have a constitutional right, like not to work if I don't want to. It's like called the 13th and 14th Amendments. But you still sometimes fall for it, right? And you need them when you're first starting out because, well, you don't have the luxury of turning away people, but it does really teach you what you want. And for a very long, again, for the years and years and years that I've practiced up until now, I was okay with it. I had this perfect business model. We were very successful where we did a general practice and we took everything from the case that was only, under $1,000 up to over hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I have gotten to a point where not only can I shift my client base, but I figured out what I really like to do and what I'm really good at and what's going to make me the most money. And so now I'm kind of transitioning to be able to be the best version of myself that I can be, the best attorney that I can be, and work the cases that I'm going to have the most luck with and also make the most money on.
Well, and I think, it's key for people to hear that. And I'm glad you said it because I think it's very refreshing for people to understand that you can't be in business to make money. And if you aren't, get the hell out of business.
You're a nonprofit. Well, that's what people say.
Go find a job.
They're like, well, a nonprofit. And I'm like, do you do pro bono work in nonprofits? And I'm like, so even nonprofits have to make money. Like they're still generating an income and everybody that works for them, if it's a successful nonprofit, is getting paid. They just don't get to cut a check at the end of the year and like take a trip to Hawaii. But every business needs to make money. And I don't think that anybody should feel bad for wanting to make money. Like we should all want to make money, right? That's what feeds us.
Well, and I think it's good for people, like, especially like new people or even seasoned people to go like, write those things down. If somebody's doing something, like I started keeping like a list when clients would do stuff and I'd be like, this is ridiculous. And now I literally will send out, here are the days and times you have access to me when I want to answer it. Like, and I used to be like, I'll answer within 24 hours. And now I'm like 48 hours, like just because I've learned I don't want to do that time. I don't want to be rushed. Like my days are very
failure, right? I don't want to say I'm going to do something and then I don't, and then you're upset about it. And now like, I want to just set the expectation that, for example, I'm closed on Thanksgiving and Friday, and I will reopen on Monday. And if you have a legal issue, like shoot me an email, call law enforcement if that's appropriate, and we will touch base next week. But I don't want to talk to you on Thanksgiving. A few years ago, had a client who I was literally on the phone with the police officers and with him on Thanksgiving while I'm prepping Thanksgiving dinner, because that was before I set the boundary of I'm not going to be your emotional support system, right? And that was one of the reasons I was like, oh, I'm never doing this again. Like I've got like flour all over myself. I'm trying to do all of this and I don't want to. Like I don't want to do that. So
Yeah, I love that. So if someone is out there and they're like, okay, I want to either one, I'm in trouble, which hopefully they aren't, or they're going, okay, I want to make sure that I've got everything the where I need it. Where is the best place for them to find you to see if you guys would even be a fit?
So I'm on all of the socials at The Lawyer King. My website is www.thelawyerking.com, and you can call or text me. I will actually say text messages go directly to my cell phone. So I still have kept that up because communication is super important to me. So my office number and text message line is 951-834-7715. And even though calling a lawyer can be scary, I assure every single person that is listening that you will feel better after you call, because you'll either have a plan to handle any issues or stressful situations, or you'll know you don't need a plan because it's really not a big deal. So I have yet to have somebody who's called me and been like, well, that was stupid, I shouldn't have done that. Really call an attorney. I don't think we're scary. And I think we can really, really help take that legal stress away. And that is just life-changing.
Well, we'll make sure that we have all of the links to where people can connect with you on our blog post. Thank you so much for spending time, for laughing, for teaching, for just everything today.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to see you face to face, and I had a really great time.
I had way too much fun recording this episode. And, even off air, we were talking about some clients that we had that, kind of made us go, oh, I don't know if I really want to work with this person. And those stories, of course, in hindsight are really funny. So it just brought to mind to me again that, in business, sometimes when you're in the moment, it can just feel like, gosh, I don't know what I'm doing or if I'm doing the right thing. And sometimes you just have to, take a minute and know that soon you'll be able to look back at those situations, tell the story, and laugh at it. So I hope that all of you have those experiences too. And just remember, when you're sitting in that moment, it's okay. There's somebody that you can help. So speaking of help, you'll notice on my Instagram that I have a new grid that's going to start happening. I wanted to try these picture grids out. So check it out. I'm going to be doing 15 days. It'll be pretty exciting to see if it actually works out, because I'm usually not good at figuring these things out. But one thing I'm really good at figuring out is how to help people. And that's why I created my new EBT formula, which is what these posts are kind of about. And I've decided that usually I only do this program through word of mouth, but I've decided that I wanted to open it up because I want to be able to help more people. And so you might be going, I don't know if this is for me. Well, if you have been in business for over 3 years and are just feeling like, maybe this isn't exactly where you thought you would be at this moment. Maybe you're already starting to go, like it's a good business, but I'm just not in love with it. Or maybe you just feel like something's not right and you can't figure it out what it is, or you're not really too sure how to get to that next step that you want to. This course is absolutely going to be for you. So we're going to be starting in 2023. There's going to be information on all of our social media, and I'm going to be opening up some free discovery calls too for people that are interested in learning a little bit more. So I hope that you will stay tuned. Please go and interact with these posts. Let me know how you're doing. I always love hearing from you guys. So no matter what it is that you're doing today, whether you were out there searching for a new lawyer, whether you're looking for some new laughs, or you're ready to change your business, I hope that you take time to have fun, because as I always say, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?